There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I am your host, Meatloaf, and it turns out I accidentally did that, and it was better than expected. All those years saying I wouldn't. I should have. All right, folks, and we went lime green on the bottom of the screen. What the? Oh, wow, that's distracting, but all right. I hope you all had a great weekend. My thoughts and prayers out to the folks down in the Gulf in Louisiana. I've got one of my old high school buddy lives down in Morgan City, Louisiana, and haven't heard from him yet. But that's a tough area to Man, that place is just getting beaten up like crazy. So hopefully everybody we've only heard of 2 fatalities so far, but there's millions of people without power. So my thoughts go out to them, even though I'm pretty sure my voice won't be right now because they don't have the power to run anything. So let's pull for them. Also, good on getting everybody or getting as many people out of Afghanistan. I don't normally do a lot of the regular news, but it's been a weekend. So. All right, guys, we are going to get into some news. Just one bit of news, and there's something I noticed, and then we're going to talk about our one big story today, and that's going to be the Rocketeer. But we'll get to that. Well, if you're not up to date, then if you're asking why am I bringing up a 30-year-old movie, well, it's a freaking awesome movie, but there's news about that too. But let's go ahead and get into what I noticed just before I got on here. And that there's a new quick TV spot for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And the most interesting thing in it is the voiceover guy, or, does the, you'll buy the whole seat, but you only need the edge. That guy's voice. He says, get ready to meet your new favorite Avenger. Now, we've speculated that Shang-Chi would end up in whatever becomes Avengers 5. But there would not been any official word about it or it was pretty obvious, but, Marvel hadn't actually said it. But now we can see that they're specifically trying to tie him to the mega franchise. And it has to be to help with box office. This is the first Marvel film to be released traditionally since the pandemic hit. Now, Black Widow came out and it did 80 million domestic, but it also domestically on its opening weekend, but it also did 60 million through Disney Plus. And then when you add in the international market and stuff, it pulled in 215 million globally. And that's great for this era, but Shang-Chi isn't going to have that. They're not getting a Disney Plus co-release. They're doing it traditionally in theaters only, as many of the studios and all the theater owners want. Now, I've heard some estimates on the low end about 35 million, but they're kind of creeping up a little bit. Word of mouth on the film has been really positive. The fact they had the review to the preview, not preview, they red carpet opening 2 weeks ago, and the response has been so positive. Their net premiere, thank you, JD, the premiere, they've upped that to about 45 million domestically, but again, no streaming service to bolster that, and we don't know how well this is going to do over in China. I mean, they've got a lot of big Chinese, big Asian film stars with Tony Leung and Michelle Yeoh. But there's also the whole Yellow Peril thing with the Mandarin and Fu Manchu. And so it's not really known how well it's going to do overseas globally. So it's all coming down to, the only thing they can count on is the domestic box office. And if it only pulls in like 45 million, that's going to be good for the film, but not on the level of a normal Marvel film. And if it doesn't do that well, there's talk that maybe they'll push Eternals back, because that they really want that one to hit, and there's a good chance that's not going to be released in China because of the director. So, if you can this weekend and you feel safe, please go see the movie. Because if you are a Marvel fan, you want Eternals to come out in November. You need to get to the theater and go see Shang-Chi. And every indication is that this movie not only is good, but it's special, that it's, I've seen reviewers gushing about it. So it may not be the type of the MCU movie you're used to, but there is going to be a lot of the standard MCU stuff in it. I have not seen it yet, so I'm taking word from a lot of people that I trust who have seen it that this is going to be a really good movie. And I will be there this weekend to go see it because, I'm excited to see it. All right, so let's get into, well, I'm going to go backwards into this. Marvel's What If is going on. And by the way, we got a clip released earlier of Marvel's What If. It is going to be the Doctor Strange episode tonight. So tonight at, I always say tonight, by the way, if you're new, I say tonight because it drops at midnight here. It'll drop at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. on the East Coast and in between. So, but I always consider that tonight. So when I say that tonight we get a new What If, and it's the Doctor Strange and it's the fourth one, I can't wait to see what this is. The clip looks like he's not going to Carmitage to fix his hands. It looks like he's going to change a moment in time. And I'm wondering if his motivation is different, if the car accident, instead of being him getting hurt, it's Christina Palmer gets killed or something like that. And he doesn't get the humility aspect. Anyway, so that's tonight. But there was some talk when they did the first episode of Marvel's What If, that it would be fun for them to bring in the Rocketeer. They wanted him to appear in the same episode as Captain Carter. So you'd have, Carter riding on the back of the Hydra Stomper, and then maybe the Rocketeer flying around. Now, it would be the right era. Actually, it would be a little later in the era. The Rocketeer actually took place in like 1938. So this would have been a little later into the war. But and while the character was created by Dave Stevens, it is somehow still part of the Disney stable of intellectual properties. I'm not exactly sure how that works, if they own the film rights still, because we'll get into that deeper, but the comic rights are with IDW, and so it's kind of weird, but so Disney would have the ability to do it. And there's another connection in that the first episode of What If was really kind of running a riff off of Captain America, the First Avenger. Well, that film was directed by Joe Johnston. Joe Johnston also directed the 1991 Rocketeer film. From what I understand, it was his work on the Rocketeer that brought him to the attention of Marvel when it came time to do the Captain America movie. So there would have been a symbolism and a cohesiveness to having him having the Rocketeer appear, but it just never happened. The cameo by the beloved jetpack wearing hero it didn't pop up, but it might be because Disney's got plans for him. Now, the reason we're doing a special, or why we're talking about the Rocketeer today, isn't just because it's a 30-year-old movie now. It actually debuted in June or July. I've got the date written down, but so it's been a little more than 30 years. But what it is that Deadline is reporting exclusively, which means that everybody is now quoting them and saying Deadline is reporting, that Disney is in the process of reviving the cult classic with a new Disney Plus movie called The Return of the Rocketeer. Now, the film is going to be written by Ed Reichort and produced by David and Jessica Oyelowo under their Yoruba Saxon banner. And the idea is that this may be a vehicle for David Oyelowo to star in. And the interesting idea here is that it would more be a sequel to the 1991 film than a reboot. So Cliff Secord would have long given up the helmet and rocket pack, and we'd be looking at a new story about a retired Tuskegee airman taking on the mantle. And I like that idea. I really do. Now, Reichort, he was the man behind the scripts for Now You See Me and its sequel, Now You See Me 2. He was the writer and consulting producer on the Netflix Jessica Jones series and was an executive story editor on Wayward Pines. So he's got really good pedigree there. Oyelowo has an impressive list of acting credits as well. I mean, it's huge, but just picking out some of the ones that you guys might recognize: Red Tails, about the Tuskegee Airmen; Jack Reacher, the Tom Cruise movie; Interstellar; The Cloverfield Paradox; and then just on top of all that, he voiced the character of Callus in Star Wars Rebels. So now this would be the first film for the Yoruba Saxon banner with their first look deal that they signed with Disney. Now, all right, I'm going to be surprised here, but some of you may not be familiar with the Rocketeer, either from the comics or the films. So we're going to go over that. But before we do me a favor, hit the like buttons, the thumbs up buttons, all those things. They're probably down in the corner over there, or maybe over there. It helps us a lot. So if you hit the like buttons, and also tell your friends about the show. You know, we're here 3 days a week. We've got other great shows coming up. Like today, right after this show, we got Black Comic Universe Rewind, an interview with John Jennings and Damian Duffy about their work adapting the works of Octavia Butler. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Pacific. Then after that is Minute to Skim It, where they Jen and I don't remember who does the show with Jen, but they pick up a book, they skim through it real quick, and then they tell you about it. And then tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, we do a 2-hour broadcast, well, mostly 2 hours, myself and Kyle Northrup, and we tell you all the great books coming out at the stores on Wednesday. Okay, we tell you about a few of the books on the stores Wednesday. It's just Jen now on Minute to Skim It. Okay. Anyway, so that's the lineup tonight, so you want to stick around for that. Now, let's do a deep dive into we're gonna cover all of the Rocketeer. JD, I just answered that question. We're doing the Rocketeer today. 30-year-old movie, the comic series from the 80s that kind of trickled through, and the fact that Disney is talking about doing a reboot/sequel. So it's all about the Rocketeer today. Now, if you aren't familiar with it, we're going to start off with the comics that it's been with a variety of publishers over the years, including Pacific Eclipse Comico, Dark Horse, and IDW. And other than the last two, they are all gone now. One of the movies Joe Johnson didn't screw up. Nice. Mr. Wickline, how are you, sir? JD, my man. Hey, Sean, good to see you. Yep. All right. So the character of the Rocketeer was created by the late Dave Stevens. First appeared in the pages of Star Slayer #2 in April of 1982. Now, publishing history for the comic is quite sporadic and mixed. They put out a lot of reprints and a lot of collections, so you could be picking up what you think was a new book of the Rocketeer, and it was really the reprints of what the other publishers had printed. It got kind of confusing. Now, Stevens was inspired by a matinee serial featuring Rocket Man that ran in the late 40s and the early 50s. There were 2 issues published at Pacific before the company folded, and another over at Eclipse, finishing up the first storyline. Then they put out a collection, then Eclipse folded. There were 3 more comics coming out later, 2 from Comico that also folded, and the 3rd from Dark Horse. And then the series went quiet for about a decade out, other than the film adaptation. Now, the main reason for the long delay had to do with health issues. The creator was diagnosed with hairy cell leukemia. Now, he continued to do illustrations and pinups up until his passing in March of 2008 at the way too young age of 52. Now, the character, I mean, Dave, you look up Dave Stevens' art, and it's astounding. I mean, it really is. The guy was a brilliant artist, and he was taken from us way too soon. Now, the character would continue on as a year later, a collection of all the previous published work was released in 2009. And then in 2011, a series of miniseries were released with folks like Mark Waid, Chris Samney, Kurt Busiek, Mike Aldred. They were all involved. Now, the series were homages to Stevens' work, doing their best to keep the fun pulp feel that he was known for. But in the end, the character and the art were so closely linked to Stevens that the newer stores never really took off. I think fans jumped in on them, but again, it really came down to Stevens was the Rocketeer and the Rocketeer was Stevens. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, the Rocketeer was Cliff Secord, a small-time pilot and barnstormer in 1938 Los Angeles, who discovers a rocket pack that had been hidden by gangsters on the run from the police. And being an adventurous soul, Cliff, with the help of his best friend and mechanic Peavy, decides to take the rocket for a spin. Or, the movie's a little different, and his whole world turns upside down after that. See, Cliff is suddenly being hunted by everyone, the mob, the Nazis, the U.S. government, and they all want the rocket back. The other interesting part of the book is that Cliff has a girlfriend named Betty, who is based on pinup model Betty Page, who Stevens drew as almost an exact match. Now, the use of Betty Page's likeness led Stevens to eventually meeting and befriending the Queen of Pinups at a time in her life when she wasn't really getting compensated for her popularity of her previous work. There was a lot of merchandise being put out about Betty Page, and she wasn't being compensated. The two of them would become close friends, and Dave would actually help her get some of that back. The legal issues and stuff. But like I said, they became really close. And in an interesting twist, she ended up passing away later the same year in 2008 at the age of 85. So now, if you've read the comics, nobody really drew like Dave Stevens. It really did feel like something unique. You look at his pinups, you look at, like I said, just Google it, flip to the images, and you're going to see all tons of his work. So the character was so closely related, and I don't know of many artists who could really do that close of that style, because it really felt like the 1930s. It was amazing. All the art, it had the very Art Deco feel, and Stevens was known for using a lot of reference and a lot of architectural designs and stuff. From what I understand, when they were doing the film, he just walked up and handed a giant pile of reference material to the set designers and the art directors of the film, who then went, "Oh yeah, we can make this." And that's why the film looks so much like the comic, because they pulled from where he pulled from. All right, speaking of the movie, we should probably get into that now. First thing, how did it get started? Well, a lot of people recognized early on that this had big screen potential. So much so that within a year, the film was optioned by Steve Miner. But he kind of went off on this tangent, or he kind of strayed away from the original concept. And in doing so, it led to the rights reverting back to Stevens. Now, in an interesting move, he gave basically a free option to the rights to a set of writers named Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo. Now, there's a good chance you know who these guys are. If you are of a decent age and remember the John Wesley Shipp Flash series, they were the guys behind that. They also did a Human Target series with Rick Springfield. They had a TV show called The Sentinel, and they did a bunch of stuff together. Now, I believe Paul DeMeo has passed within the last 5 years or so, and Danny Bilson is still working. Should have done a little better research on that, but that's just pulling from my memory. And I know they did some comic writing work as well, but this was early on. I think it was before the Flash series. It was well before the Flash series came out. So these were new guys, and they wanted to do this series. Yeah, Sean, they're a great series, aren't they? I loved John Wesley Shipp Flash. I mean, that was, and I do appreciate how much the CW's Flash series leans into that, and it pulled from that series. That's one of the things I really like about the CW shows is their honoring of the legacy, whether it's bringing back Terry Hatcher on Supergirl, or John Wesley Shipp and Mark Hamill on The Flash, Amanda Pays as well. It's just really nice that they remember those older series and stuff. Now, their first plan was to go low budget, which I thought was interesting. They wanted to go black and white and do like an homage to the old serials like Commander Cody and Flash Gordon and stuff. I mean, they were just going to go straight out, film it in the Valley, and low budget special effects and stuff. But they went out looking for a director and came across a gentleman named William Deere. And when he came on board to direct and kind of help shape the script, they tossed the low budget angle right out the window. So what they did was they wrote the script and they kept it really close to the original concept. But they added a Hollywood subplot and a big battle scene that takes place on a Nazi Zeppelin, like you do, because Zeppelin battles for the Rocketeer sounds perfect, right? They also made an interesting... Now, I should preface this, is that there are multiple stories about why this happened. My research came up with 3. This one is the one that seems the most straightforward, that they made a significant change to Cliff's girlfriend. So to avoid comparisons to Betty Page, they renamed her Jenny and changed her from a model to a Hollywood extra looking for her break. Now that works in the story, but it also, in the comics, Betty is pretty much just Betty Page. So there's the nude modeling aspect, which would make the series harder to sell. Because, I mean, it's got this kind of family-friendly vibe that is what the actual movie did. But having that stuff in it, that the more adult content, would make it harder to sell. So that's one version. Another version I heard is that Disney specifically didn't want that part in there because, again, they were pushing it more towards the family friendly so they could sell toys. And the third one I've heard is that Betty Page didn't want her name associated with the film. With how good of friends they became, I don't know. But that might have been at the time. I don't know which one is true. But all three stories are out there. You can pick which one you think is best, I guess. Now, this created 83, its first option. Now we're in 1986. And this is long before, a couple years before big blockbusters like Batman and Dick Tracy. You know, Superman was a hit, but it'd been almost a decade from that. So studios were a little leery. But Disney was interested because, like I said, they saw this film as having merchandise and toy possibilities. You know, they saw what all the stuff that Superman sold and thought, maybe we could do that if we had a superhero character. And, you know, at the time they didn't own Marvel. This was a few years before that. Sarcasm. And now it was originally set up to go to Disney's subsidiary of Touchstone, which would allow them to be a little more adult, but then, and they brought everybody on with a 3-picture deal. The idea was that they wanted to do this kind of like an Indiana Jones thing, where it would be a big three-picture trilogy, and, you know, but Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the head of the studio at the time, felt it would do better under the Walt Disney Pictures banner. Well, at least when it came to toys. So again, anything adult like Betty and the nude modeling and all that, right out the window. The main thing Disney seemed to be interested in was the name of the film. You know, the Rocketeer. They could sell people with rocket packs and stuff. I mean, it's almost like they didn't really care that much about the content. But that would change because Bilson and DeMille went off and they turned in their initial treatment. And then they went through 5 years of revision hell. They got fired and rehired multiple times. And the studio kept they'd bring in other writers on the projects. They'd get scripts back in, they'd throw it out, and they'd bring Bilson and DeMille back in. Scenes that were cut, you know, in one draft were then suddenly brought back in. Dialogue that was initially hated would suddenly be used, you know, oh no, we like that line, bring it back in. And all of these delays eventually led to the director, William Deere, having to leave the project because it just had drug on for so long. Well, this is where Joe Johnston enters. And it's not like Disney went out, we need to find a director. What about that guy who works with Lucasfilms? Quite the opposite. Joe Johnston heard, at least this is what I'm told, is Joe Johnston heard about the opening, and he was a fan of the comic. So he approached Disney offering his services, and they hired him. It's pretty much that straightforward. Now, after 3 major rewrites, the script was finally approved, and production began in early 1990. Now, we're going to pause here. I got a lot more to talk about when we come back, but I want to get our commercial break in. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
To be continued.
3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Today's comics market is ripe with new titles by creators who are determined to get their books into your hands. My name is Henri Compen. For the last decade, I've been making and selling my own creator-owned comics and dealing as a collector in live sales. My signature series, Yi Sun Shin, is the book that cannot be defeated in battle and has over 250,000 copies in print. Now I'm taking comics to the next level and laying the groundwork for my fellow creators to get their voices heard so they can connect directly with you. This is your chance to engage live with top comic book talent and get your comics signed without having to wait in long lines or pay any fees. But remember, we only have a limited amount of their books in stock, so always remember to call it as you see it.
I laugh sometimes at some of the other commercials we've got on here. Henri Copen's commercial is very intense. He's a very intense person on his commercial. I think that's great. So you should check out Kicking It with Henri and check out what Henri shows on the experience here. Before we jump back in, I want to point out that we had our Post-it Note anniversary over the weekend, and I got to interview on Saturday Marvel luminary, longtime writer and editor Danny Fingeroth, who recently put out Marvelous Life, The Amazing Story of Stan Lee, the biography of Stan Lee. And the book itself is a wonderful book looking at the history. But the interview, if you get a chance, and if you didn't see the interview live, go check it out on our YouTube page. It's part of the Post-it Note anniversary. I think it's part 3. It's the second to last interview in that group. I'm also part of the last interview with Enrica Jang from Red Stylo Media, which was also another good interview. But the Danny Fingeroth interview was something special. It was probably one of my favorite interviews I've ever gotten a chance to do. So you should check that out if you got some free time. Getting to spend an hour with Danny and talking about Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and the original, back when he was writing stuff like What If and Web of Spider-Man and Darkhawk. Really a great interview. I mean, it was a lot of fun. So JD points out that Kicking It with Henri and Kevin is Wednesday at 8, and Virtual Signing with Henri is Fridays. And JD put the link into the Post-it Anniversary Part 3. So when we're done with the show, or just save that link and watch it when we're off the air tonight, because we got some great stuff coming up tonight. Black Comic University, minute to skim it, and then I'm back with Kyle for in-stores this week. So just stick around here. Just leave this on all day. All right, let's get back into it. And we're at a very interesting point when it comes to the did I say university again? Oh. Black Comic Universe. It really should be university is the problem. It should be university. All right. This is now the important part of putting together a movie is, of course, putting a cast together. And I find this pretty interesting, that the names and stuff that they were going after. And if you've seen The Rocketeer, just take a moment. Let's I'm going to tell you some of the names. Just picture it in your mind. So when it came to casting, there were a lot of big names considered, and even offered the parts. Now, names like Kevin Costner as Cliff, Matthew Modine, Dennis Quaid, Kurt Russell, Bill Paxton, and Paxton said that he was really close to actually getting the part, Emilio Estevez, and Johnny Depp. All of these guys were considered. There's even a report that says that they offered the role to a young Vincent D'Onofrio who turned it down. Now, Billy Campbell, who is said to have the story is that Campbell wanted the part so much that he went and got his hair cut to match the characters in the comics. So when he went in to do the audition, it would be that much more obvious. Now, he was the favorite of both Johnston and of Dave Stevens, but the Disney execs were like, we still want an A-list name. And but Johnston was able to bring them around. And Campbell was an interesting choice because not only that, but he also had a fear of flying, which made some of the stunts interesting. But he quickly read all the comics. He also studied books on aviation and immersed himself in the music from the era to really get into the character. And then he worked with aerial coordinator Craig Hoskins to get over his fear of flying. Though, for safety's sake, most of the stunts used a double. But I guess there was still enough of him that, they had to work with him. For Jenny, there's a bunch of big names for Jenny as well. They looked at Sherilyn Fenn, Kelly Preston, Diane Lane, and Elizabeth McGovern. Then they eventually settled on Jennifer Connelly. For the part of Peavy, Stevens had his heart set on Lloyd Bridges, which really would have been interesting, but Bridges turned him down, and then they went to Alan Arkin. The part, one of the interesting for me, I love Timothy Dalton as JD says there needs to be a swear jar for when Dan says the U word. Yes. I should put one up. But when they went, before they gave the part to Timothy Dalton, who I thought was absolutely spectacular in the role, they offered it to Jeremy Irons and Charles Dance. Charles Dance from Game of Thrones. Also, they went for Eddie Valentine, the gangster. They originally wanted Joe Pesci, but he turned him down. And they got Paul Sorvino. And the other big part, which is interesting because it's not actually in the comic, is legendary eccentric Howard Hughes, played by Terry O'Quinn. Now, in the comics, the inventor of the Rocket Pack is actually the pulp hero Doc Savage. But Disney didn't have the rights to Doc Savage. They substituted a real person instead. But the story behind that is they wanted to help promote one of their other properties. Disney at the time owned the Queen Mary and the Spruce Goose, the big airplane created by Howard Hughes. The big wooden airplane that was said would never fly and then did. So they owned these two attractions, and the Spruce Goose was the only thing that Disney owned at the time that was losing money. So they wanted to put Hughes in there, and there was even the scene with this, like a mock-up of the Spruce Goose that Cliff uses to escape. All of that was put in there to help ticket sales for the Spruce Goose attraction in Long Beach. Disney, always about the money. There's also an interesting line in the movie where Cliff is fighting Neville Sinclair, played by Dalton, of course. And he says, "Where's your stuntman now, Sinclair?" And Neville responds, I do my own stunts. Well, this was put in because of Dalton. It turns out Dalton is the only James Bond actor to do most of his own stunts. So there's a little nod to the fact that this guy does his own stunts. Now, before we get into this anymore, and if JD's ready, I thought it'd be fun to go ahead and show the trailer for the film. So if you guys haven't seen it in a while, here's the trailer for The Rocketeer.
They chased it to an airstrip in the valley. Two of my best pilots were killed during the test phase.
How soon can you rebuild it?
Rebuild it? No, gentlemen. I'm sorry I ever dreamed the thing up.
What's the matter? I don't know. There's something under the seat. It's a rocket.
A rocket?
Like in the comic books.
I wouldn't touch that if I were you.
You bring in our rocket, and I'll double your price.
The feds are mixed up in this.
What do you mean you found something?
When you borrow something, you don't tell nobody. They call that stealing.
How do I look?
Like a hood ornament. Are you trying to kill yourself?
I like it.
Hold the front page! Come on, Bigelow, give us a name.
How about Rocketeer? Don't threaten me, Eddie. Just do your job.
Next time you go after one of my men, I'll kill you.
Whoever owns this thing is going to want it back. Now just get in the hangar.
Prepare yourself for a shock. I'm the Rocketeer.
Rock who?
Secord, I don't think you know the game you're playing.
We're going to get ourselves killed over this thing. The only place this thing is going is back to the Fed. We had an agreement.
Get the rocket.
All right. How cool is that? Okay. Disney ought to just re-release that in the theaters right now with the fact that they're having, I'd go see it. Open it up wide, just everybody. Was that Rondo Hatton? No, it wasn't. But Stevens used Rondo Hatton as the look for Luthor in the film. So they made up Tiny Ron. The actor's name is Tiny Ron to look like Rondo. So I got nothing on that one. I don't know why he doesn't burn his butt. Nothing. By the way, there's a clip in the movie that's smuggled out from Germany that shows the Germans trying to do their own version of the rocket, and it ends up killing the pilot. Well, the person playing the pilot in it is the Rocketeer creator Dave Stevens. He did a cameo in the film. But all right, let's get back to the production on this. So the plot of the film was, as you could probably tell, two of Valentine's men steal the rocket pack from Hughes, but during the escape from the police, they end up in the airfield. One of them gets killed. The other one hides the rocket inside a GB Racer, which is the little airplane. And then he gets wounded by the police. Valentine, getting off track. Well, Cliff, of course, finds the rocket. He and Peavy figure it out. Valentine's men are working for Sinclair. Sinclair sends his goon Luthor to figure out where the rocket was hidden. Everything ends up at the airfield. An older guy is dressed up as a clown. He's zipping in his old airplane that starts having problems. Cliff uses the rocket pack to save him. It gets covered by the media. All of this is going on, and he becomes this big success, this big news thing, and now everybody knows where he is. All this ties into Jenny is an extra on Sinclair's next movie, and when Cliff goes and tries to tell her about the rocket pack, Sinclair overhears this, and he starts getting close to Jenny so he can find out more about Cliff. Now, the next day, when from here, things get even crazier. As Jenny gets kidnapped, Cliff and Peavy are taken in by the U.S. government, the FBI, and find out that the pack's creator is Howard Hughes. But Cliff escapes with it because he has to go rescue Jenny. There's a big reveal that Sinclair is actually a Nazi, and there's a huge battle at Griffith Observatory, which has the mobsters, once learning Sinclair's true allegiance, turning on him because they would rather help the cops than the Nazis. And it all leads to this big battle on a flying Zeppelin. Now, the film ends with them saving the day, returning the rocket pack to Hughes, who then gives Cliff a new GB Air Racer. But we also find out that Peavy had been kind of drawing the blueprints off of the rocket and were supposedly lost at one point. Well, Jenny saved him before the fire got there, so we end with Peavy talking about his rocket, his blueprints, going, I think I can make a better one than Hughes made. So it's obviously set up that it could move forward, even though, they give him the rocket back and stuff. Now, honestly, to me, this is hands down one of the best superhero films of the 20th century. I mean, between Superman and Batman, this popped up and it was brilliant. The film was released on June 21st in 1991 and earned $9.6 million its opening weekend in about 1,600 theaters. Now, Disney came out and said they were pleased because this was a new intellectual property. Well, they didn't say that, this wasn't a sequel to anything, and there were no real big stars at the time. This was, I think Timothy Dalton was probably the biggest name in it. So, like I said, they said they were pleased, but in truth, it was fourth for the weekend. It was in the same weekend and came behind Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, so your big Kevin Costner movie, City Slickers with Billy Crystal, big comedy, and then the movie Dying Young, and then you had The Rocketeer. And it ended its run with a meager $46.6 million. But back in 1991, that's not horrible, but it was considered a commercial disappointment. But it did receive a lot of positive reviews, including good words from Roger Ebert, Leonard Maltin, and Pete Travers of Rolling Stone. So it was well received and well liked, but it just didn't make the box office that they had hoped. Now, Stevens himself was said to be pleased with about 70% of the film. He had high praise for Johnson's directing, and he was a big fan of Campbell, saying that when he came into the audition, he just nailed it shut. He was made for it. The part was his. What he was disappointed in is that there was some real character moments that he liked that got cut for time. So maybe we need to start the Joe Johnston director's cut of the Rocketeer petition. Let's start that hashtag. Get the director's cut out. Now, while the film was originally envisioned as the first of a trilogy, the box office numbers it ended that. But the new word of the film isn't really the first time Disney tried to do more with it. In 2016, there was word that Disney was developing a reboot with writers Max Winkler, the son of Henry Winkler, and Matt Spicer doing the script. And it had been an interesting trio of people to produce. There was Brigham Taylor, who was a producer on The Jungle Book with Jon Favreau, But his partners on this were Blake Griffin of the Los Angeles Clippers and Ryan Khalil, who was the center for the Carolina Panthers at the time. They had, it seems Griffin and Khalil were partners in this venture called Mortal Media, and they approached Taylor with the project idea. The pitch was set 6 years after the original film with a black female lead. Now, Secord had gone missing while fighting Nazis, so an unlikely new hero emerges to stop a corrupt rocket scientist from stealing the rocket pack plans and changing the fate of the Cold War. That's the basic pitch for it. Now, the project bounced around a bit with a report in February of 2020 saying that Azia Squire wrote a new draft for the sequel that was expected to be made as a Disney Plus movie. Now, it's unclear how that report in February 2020 has now led us to this. So maybe it's just the natural progression of it, or maybe they stopped that project and then this next one came along. Now, besides that, there was also a one season of an animated series on Disney Junior that featured a 7-year-old Kit, great-granddaughter of Cliff, who became the new Rocketeer. In the series, Campbell returns, but he voices Dave, Kit's father, who would have been the live-action character's grandson. And while the series got a lot of positive reviews, it was canceled after just the one season. Now, the series had a lot of references to the film, though. It referred to Howard Hughes and Lothar, and at one point they find Cliff's old CB, and there's the picture of Jenny in it still. So, in a lot of ways, this film, and you guys can disagree with me on this, but this was kind of the blueprint for what is now the modern day superhero. Big action, good humor, fun Easter eggs, casting for talent with actors that feel like the characters, and a strong embracing of what makes the comic book work. Johnston didn't shy away from the source material, and he even championed the idea of having Stevens on the set as much as possible, which Disney wasn't thrilled with, but Stevens was there through most of the filming. They didn't try to modernize it in either tone or style. They kept the Art Deco feel. They kept the 1938 feel. And, I mean, it felt like the comic was put on the screen. Now, maybe if it opened up on a less crowded weekend, more people might have seen it. We could have got the trilogy, but I don't know. It's always that kind of thing, huh? Now, the Rocketeer was a hero for his era. He fought for the love of his girl, and at one point he fights for his country, but he didn't hesitate to put his life on the line for things that mattered. You know, this dangerous rocket that could burn him or blow up, he straps it on to go rescue somebody from an airplane. He did the things for what mattered. And if they carry that belief forward into a sequel, it doesn't matter who dons the helmet. So as long as they have that same meaning, that same feel. So I like the idea of them doing a sequel. I like the idea of it being a Tuskegee Airman. I think that's a great idea and could easily carry forward what Dave created. Now, JD says, having Stevens on set is interesting, concerning he wouldn't allow Rick Baker on set for the werewolf transformations in Wolfman. Only Rick Baker. Didn't know that. That would have made a lot of sense to have Rick on there. Then, of course, this was one of Joe's earlier films, so maybe he had it was a little more open-minded at the time, you know? You get older, you get grumpy, you start kind of getting laser focused on things like I do all the time. So, all right, so that's my retrospective on a 30-year-old movie I love. If you haven't seen it and you have Disney Plus, and I know a lot of us do because we're watching What If, we're watching Loki, it's on Disney Plus. Go watch it. After all our shows today. Don't go right now. Tonight when the shows are over, or tomorrow. Put it on when you're working. Pull up Disney Plus and watch The Rocketeer. Or this weekend with the family. It's a good family film. It really is a good film. There's some great acting, some good humor. It is a fun film. And I don't think I've met anybody who has come along and said, oh, I hate that. JD says, I have someone's Disney Plus. All right, JD. I understand. All right, guys. Well, remember, stick around, because right after this is Black Comic Universe. Now, it's a rewind interview with John Jennings and Damian Duffy about their work adapting the works of Octavia Butler, at 6 p.m. Eastern, or right after this. After that will be Minute to Skim It with Miss Jen at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And then I'll be back with Kyle at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for In Stores This Week. Hey, he did it. Yep. I'm working on it. Black Comics Universe. It doesn't matter if I say the X or not. Oh, thank you, Val. Val says, good info on the Rocketeer. We'll add it to my watch list now. So thanks for tuning in, Val. JD, thanks for running the board. Sean and JD Smith, thank you guys for tuning in as always. Everybody else, I hope you all have a terrific day. Enjoy yourself. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you back tomorrow when I do something else. Good night, everybody.